a very high quality of life for each of the citizens. While we acknowledge that economic prosperity plays a large role in this, we also think that it encompasses social prosperity. Some of the core values of our nation are fairness, equal opportunity, and social security. That's why we have things like accessible public education, social welfare, and universal health care. Unfortunately, in order to finance these social objectives, the government needs to spend a lot of money. And with current projections, the government is unable to sustain this level of expenditure. So to give Kiwis the kind of New Zealand they want, we need a productive economy that is able to finance these social outcomes and objectives. So the 2010 budget seeks to have improved economic growth and higher real income. However, we have to keep in mind that these are not ends in and of themselves. They're just the means to get to the kind of society in which we want to live. But to get there, we have to first identify some of the problems that New Zealand is currently facing. And one of the big ones is the increasing budget deficit. The government budget is in a dire situation where we have increasing levels of debt. And we think there are two main problems that arise from this. The first is that New Zealand is seen as a very risky venture, which means that investment into the country is dissuaded. But secondly, we think that once you get into the cycle of debt servicing, it detracts from your ability to be able to spend on more important things like social services. The second key problem facing New Zealand is our struggling productive sector, and there are three aspects of this. The first is underinvestment. We think that because the returns on speculative investment are not currently taxed, you incentivize this kind of activity, and that means you have less money going into the productive economy. So for example, people might choose to buy a second home instead of investing money into a new business or into an existing business, and we think that's a problem in terms of our productivity. The second aspect of this is the currency market. New Zealand is one of the most volatile currencies in the world, and these fluctuations in the New Zealand dollar mean that it's very hard for businesses to predict future profits and returns, and this discourages them from investing into the country. But secondly, the Reserve Bank's key focus of controlling inflation has led to high exchange rates, and that's put a lot of pressure on exporters in terms of being able to keep their products competitive on an international market. And finally, productivity. Now, productivity is what really drives real income. And as you see, New Zealand has been doing worse than its OECD counterparts in terms of productivity gains. We think this is for a couple of reasons. Firstly, lack of investment in research and development, and secondly, the exodus of the skilled workforce out of the country. So we think there are four areas that we're going to combat to improve this situation. We want to get productivity gains, ensure a stable exchange rate, we want to incentivize investment, and we want to reduce our debt. And now I'll pass over to James to show you exactly how we propose to do this.
Thank you, Nicole. The first key area of policy recommendation relates to taxation. Now, while everyone's reluctant to increase the burden of taxation, we think that under the current circumstances, there is very little alternative. And we have three policy recommendations for you. Firstly, increase GST to 15%, while increasing benefit payments over the next 2 years. Secondly, institute a capital gains tax of 15% with the exclusion of owner-occupied homes and capital raising activities such as IPOs. We think that this will not only raise additional revenue, but will also solve the problem of investment incentives, which Nicole outlined. And the third part is an inheritance tax. We think that New Zealand has always supported merit-based accrual of wealth as opposed to entrenched class systems. We think that this tax provides valuable revenue while being consistent with those policies. We think that these taxation policies have a fair and equitable burden of taxation across New Zealand society. And the second key area of our recommendation is monetary policy. This involves the government giving to the Reserve Bank of New Zealand authority to adjust the excise tax on fuel So our policies overall will increase revenue through our taxation policies, cut expenditure through our superannuation policies, and help the productive sector of the economy by improving investment, by stabilising the currency market, and by improving productivity. So now I'd like to hand you over to Alex, who will talk about the impact on the bottom line for each of these proposals.
So our first proposal is the increase in GST, and we're going to do this in a staggered method over 3 years to 15%. Now this increase will generate $6 billion extra GST revenue for the government in 2020, and this will just increase going into the future. Our second strategy is implementing a capital gains tax, and this once again will be staggered over 3 years up to 10%. So this will produce a peak revenue of $900 million. After this peak revenue, we will see a decline in tax revenue as the incentive to shift away from those traditional investment options to the more productive side of our economy kicks in. And we're happy to see this decline because we believe the benefit will increase from that productive investment. Our next strategy is around superannuation. And you can see here how we've implemented the increase in the age bracket and also how we've implemented the means testing. Now the percentage value used here for the means testing is the total amount we want to reduce superannuation by. The total amount of people affected will be much greater than this because we're going to introduce mean testing in a staggered way. There won't simply be a sharp cut-off point after which you receive no superannuation. So these two features combined will produce very large savings for the New Zealand government of around about